Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here today. So I'm going to talk about the use of the field nurseries in East Africa, Kenya, and Ethiopia. But I'm just presenting this work. I've been working in using the nurseries since 2009. But this is the work of many collaborators, many units that have put a lot of effort to make this happen. I want to thank Dr. Sridhar Bhavani, that is the manager of the nurseries in Kenya. And he works as a breeder for CIMMYT. And they have done a fantastic job making this work happen. Also, I want to thank our sponsors, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and DFID. I'm a plant pathologist at North Dakota State University, and before that I was a postdoc with the USDA, and that's how I got involved initially in this project. So I would like for you to take a minute and think about that, imagine that you lost your job. The fear, the uncertainty that will cause, because now the future as you plan it, the future as you imagine for you and your family, it's not there anymore. But what's still there is all the responsibilities you have for them. All the dreams, you still have those. But your future now, it's like how you achieve those, how you get there. So that's how thousands of farmers feel every day. It is not only farmers in East Africa, it's farmers all over the world feel that way, that uncertainty that what if the crop doesn't make it? But in the most recent years, farmers in East Africa have experienced that, and I continue to experience that possibly every season if we don't act and continue to provide resources for them. In this picture, we have Simon is a farmer in Kenya, and after the destruction of his field because of a new strain of the UG99 lineage group of the stem rust pathogen, Simon didn't have a paycheck at the end of the season, so his kids probably didn't make it to school. His son didn't make it to the university. But it's because it's an investment. We think about crops and we think about food security sometimes from out here, but when you see it in the field, it really hits you. It hits you that affects the life not only of the farmer, but the families, the community. So we need to look at it in that perspective. So we know that we have to feed more people. The statistics show that we're going to feed more than 9 billion people by 2050. And we talk about we need to produce more food than we have produced ever before. But this is not new. We have known this in the 60s. That was in the cover of the magazines. And we know it's still a threat. It's not only about yields. It's not only about producing more, but it's also about what are we losing. These statistics are a little bit old, but it show the picture that it's not only about producing more. We're producing quite a bit, but we also lose a lot to diseases and pests every year. So by providing resistance to the disease to develop better management strategies, we're also contributing to be able to produce more food for the next generations. So if we want to have food on the table, especially we know in the developed country, we think about wheat as something that we can splurge on. We think about crackers, cakes, a piece of bread in the morning. But for millions of people, wheat is their livelihood, is their everyday food, is what they put on the table for their kids and their family. So going back to 1998 in Uganda, we have a new threat, a threat that we thought it was put to sleep, that we didn't have to worry about. But Dr. Borlaug considered this the major threat to wheat in the last 50 years. And you can see him here talking to the researchers in Kenya, looking for solutions, already putting together the coalition of scientists that will take as their role in this project to bring solutions, to look for new resistance. Here you can see wheat grains that is not being affected by the disease. And look at what happens when you have non-protected wheat. So you have not only less number of grains, but also the size and the quality of it. And this is not the extreme case like Dave mentioned. In some cases, you don't get anything out of the field, because if the wheat lodges or if the disease gets in early in the season, then there is no grain production. So this disease was so, the threat of UG99 was so big, they made it to the news, the cover of magazines, but because of its economic and also food security threat, and also prompted other sponsors to help us in this project that started in 2005 by the Sounding the Alarm by Dr. Norman Borlaug. So this is how stem rust looks in the field. For those of you that are not familiar with, you can see the pustules, the spores that are erupting from the epidermis of the stems, and also you find it on the leaf. And what this pathogen does, it penetrates the tissue and then robs the nutrients from the plant. It doesn't kill it instantly. It's a silent killer, because it goes in and start taking all the sugars and nutrients that are supposed to go to grain production and grain filling. So what we're looking for is resistance that can prevent the pathogen from taking those nutrients from the plant. If we can prevent it completely, that would be wonderful. If we can delay the process, if we can limit the amount of nutrients that it can take away, then we're providing some good opportunities. Here I'm going to show you a video of the nurseries in East Africa, just so you get familiar how they look on the ground.
Through the DRRW, scientists in national wheat breeding programs and international CGIAR centers across 22 countries have sent hundreds of thousands of wheat lines to Kenya for evaluation. The wheat lines that survive rigorous testing in Njoro may move on to become publicly released varieties in Kenya and other DRRW partner countries.
Currently we are at the screening site at Kalo, which is Kenya Agricultural Livestock and Research Organization. And we have this quarantine screening site wherein we test the materials against stem rust pathogen race UG99. So what we are seeing here is a part of the international stem rust screening nurseries. And we have got about 23,000 entries that we are screening against this disease. So the sole objective behind having such kind of screening facilities is to evaluate the materials and to identify lines that are resistant to this disease, which would not only facilitate release of varieties which are resistant, but also at the same time initiate pre-breeding efforts to transfer the resistance from the already identified lines into some better adapted backgrounds. We are screening against UG99, but we're also looking at the agronomic type, which could be quite useful in terms of identifying lines which are better adapted to the given environment. And in addition to that, we also have other factors, like we have natural yellow rust infection, which also helps us to identify lines which are resistant to both the diseases. A lot of infrastructural upgrades have been done to facilitate better phenotyping against this disease at Kalo. So some of the infrastructural upgrades have been land leveling, fertility management, construction of the reservoir. So far we have screened close to about 350,000 entries from almost about 20 to 25 different countries and research institutions.
Right, so in addition to screen materials in the nurseries, like since 2009, we have screened over 400,000 entries. We also utilize these nurseries to train the next generation of scientists. So since the inception of the nurseries, over 200 junior scientists have been trained in Kenya. And here you see them in the field. So they learn about the disease. They also learn about epidemiology, how the disease moves, and how they can detect it, how can they take data. One of the things that we realized at the beginning was that everybody had their own way of taking data in the field, so we could not communicate effectively. So what we decided was to provide this training so the scientists from different countries can come and learn about the disease, learn how to take data. We start communicating more effectively. But also we learned that we can also bring new collaborations, because people that will never collaborate but realize that they're working on similar areas now had an opportunity to spend a few days in the field working together. And so there was not only the a way to get data, but also to develop new projects, get new ideas, develop variety. So it has been a fantastic opportunity. Just wanted to point out that the trainees have to wear their Tyvek suit in the field, because we're talking about people going back to their countries, and the spores of the pathogen can, as Dave mentioned, can move with people. So we teach them about that, how like the souvenir you don't want to take from Kenya to your country. And so, make them aware of the reality of the situation, I think has been a great opportunity for all of us through these nurseries. This is a map of all the different partners that we have that are sending their great materials to Kenya and to Ethiopia to be evaluated, because a lot of times we're very protective of our materials, of our knowledge, but this is an opportunity where everybody brings together the best of their best. Anything that they think can be useful for the better good, the larger good, they're sending it to Kenya. So it's been fascinating to see what scientists can do when they start working together to a common goal and leave behind some of those barriers. That's how I got involved. As I mentioned, I was a postdoctoral fellow with the USDA, and at that point we were sending land races, heirloom varieties from the gene bank at the USDA to Kenya for evaluation, and have the opportunity to identify some of the resistant materials that were there. And during the project there, I developed some genetic populations so we can identify the genes. And once I moved from the USDA to my position at North Dakota State University, I was able to continue that work and brought with me some of that project. So my first student, Jason Cern, was able to take in then for his thesis, this project, and continue working on this. So again, the nurseries in Kenya help also train students in the US. He had the opportunity to go and look at the materials there. And now on the top you can see the resistant line that we were able to identify compared to the susceptible. Check. Now we're in the point that we have identified our genomic region that is associated with this resistance, and to the point that we're doing positional cloning, we're down to 5 genes that may be candidate genes for this resistant, and that resistant also has been incorporated into adapted materials, so can be utilized in the new generation of resistant varieties to UG99 and other races. This is an example from Dr. Ravi Singh's program, and this is what you can obtain after years of selections in the field. The first cross Ravi made for this line started in 2006, so it took 10 years almost to come to this point, but as you can tell, these are lines that are completely susceptible to the pathogen, and this line is just kind of a little oasis in the field, green. It let us know the efforts that go into developing resistant varieties, but also the patience that it has to be in place to be able to identify something that is good and wait 10 years to make it, to see it happening. And like this variety, this line, there's also many more in the pipeline that are being developed, seed has been increased and deployed into target areas to prevent the disease from moving to other regions and causing epidemics. This line was developed through using the shuttle breeding program between Mexico and Kenya. And so it has allowed Dr. Ravi Singh to be able to, and his team, to be able to select for wider adaptability, better qualities, not only to UG99, but for other diseases, other agronomic traits, other stresses. So by using this shuttle breeding program between locations in Mexico and Kenya, we have been able to move faster and also get better adaptability for different regions of the world. In addition to the applied science that we see happening by selecting materials in the field and being able to develop these varieties, scientists have also used the nurseries in Kenya for their basic research. So thanks to the data that was obtained initially from the nurseries in Kenya, 2 different groups have been able to clone these resistant genes. So now we have a better idea of how resistance is provided, what are the mechanisms behind that resistance, how can we better utilize them, and also being able to bring to identify genes in other species, wild relatives of wheat, that can then be introgressed into new varieties for the future. In addition to all of this wonderful science, we have been able to develop a great community of scientists that understand now the value of collaborations, of working together to one goal, to be able to find common ground for development of new projects, training of students. And I think we have really a great momentum, but the work is not done. As you found out from Dave's talk, we have new races coming out every year. And stem rust is not the only threat that we have for wheat. There's also other pathogens, but also abiotic stresses like drought, like heat. And so the work is not done. Now we have a community that knows the value of working together. So I think we can capitalize on that and move forward. So I hope that this example of the use of the international nurseries, you can take this home and think about how can you use this kind of facility, this kind of opportunities for other projects, and also provide some feedback to us if you have done anything similar, of seen other projects, how can we better utilize and get the most out of these activities. And with that, I'll take any questions later on. Thank you.